and B26-0370, the Vending Compliance and Modernization Amendment Act of 2025. The Vending Compliance and Modernization Amendment Act of 2025 was introduced by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor. This bill mirrors changes requested by the executive in last year's Budget Support Act, but the council was ultimately not able to include the mayor's proposed subtitle because it was not germane to the budget. The legislation includes several updates to the law, including creating separate license categories for food trucks and sidewalk vendors, authorizing the Department of Public Works to dispose of vending merchandise and equipment left in the public space after hours, and allowing for the towing of food trucks parked illegally. The legislation also establishes criminal and enhanced civil penalties for vending without a license or from an unauthorized location, among other things. The Vending Modernization Amendment Act of 2025 was introduced by myself and Chairman Mendelson. This bill reflects many of the changes requested by the executive, but proposes an alternative enforcement regime. While it establishes a backstop of stricter enforcement that would only be invoked after civil enforcement efforts have failed, rather than as a first option, I think this is crucial to continuing to establish the trust in district government that's needed now more than ever, with many of the immigrants that comprise our street vendor community who have been subjected to aggressive increases in federal forces. The Street Vendor Advancement Amendment Act was passed almost 3 years ago, and as I've said many times as chair of this committee, I am frustrated by DLCP's deliberate choices to undermine implementation of the law. DLCP has refused to implement key management and enforcement mechanisms, including allowing the Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant vending zone to go without the legally required vending zone manager for years. It's not lost on me that DLCP repeatedly decries vendors for not following the law, yet they've not followed the law themselves. I'm eager to discuss how we can finally get the vending zone on track and how to address other barriers that vendors continue to face. Today, we'll also discuss the Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant Vision Framework for Public Realm Design being published by the Office of Planning. With funds I secured, the Office of Planning conducted a public life study that included data-driven analysis and inclusive community engagement with the ultimate goal of improving the quality and use of public spaces in Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant, including how sidewalk vending activity can be better accommodated in those places to help those communities thrive. It's been 2 decades since the first design for public spaces in these neighborhoods, a similar amount of time since the Columbia Heights Mall was constructed, and 25 years since the Columbia Heights Metro opened, all of which has driven the significant pedestrian traffic and commercial activity in central Columbia Heights, which often rivals downtown DC. Mount Pleasant Street, similarly, has not had a comprehensive update to its public spaces in many decades. In the study area, there are about a dozen small parks and plazas. Many of them are under federal control, most of them are in disrepair, and none of them fully meet the needs of the communities that have little other public space. I think that if DCUSA Mall hosted sports teams instead of big box stores, we'd already be talking about a multi-million-dollar renovation of the building and the neighborhoods that surround it. Maybe there'd even be a mayoral task force. Instead, residents and visitors are left with deteriorating sidewalks, sun-baked plazas, broken fountains, retail vacancies, dangerous roads, and public infrastructure that's clearly at the end of its functional life. When you layer on top of that the poor implementation of the vending zone, dropping dozens of Jersey barriers onto the sidewalk and poorly maintained public spaces, the message that neighborhood residents receive from their government is, you shouldn't be here, and if you're here, you should leave quickly. This lack of priority from the executive was unfortunately shown in the process of getting this study out in the first place. Despite being required by law in the street vending law, it was published over a year late and only after significant pressure from this committee. That's a shame because I think the Office of Planning and their contractors did an excellent job on a very expansive study. There were extensive field observations of how people are using public spaces, comparative analysis of vending areas in other cities, and recommendations on how streets and parks can be redesigned. I'm glad we finally have the study out in the world, and I think that its recommendations are a solid roadmap for us to work from to invest in the neighborhood's vitality, but only if those recommendations are followed through on, which will require resources and a lot of interagency coordination. I thank the Office of Planning for being here today to answer questions about the study process and recommendations, and look forward to diving into those recommendations to understand what's needed for implementation. Okay, we're going to turn to public witnesses. We have our first panel is completely in person, and then our second panel has some folks on the Zoom. When I call your name, if you're here in person, please come forward to the witness table. If you're on the Zoom, please accept the invitation to join the panel to be promoted to the panel so that you can access your camera and microphone. Our first panel includes Commissioner Jeremy Sherman, Chair of ANC 1A, Commissioner Christine Miller, ANC 1A05, Commissioner Anthony Thomas Davis, ANC 1A06, and William Jordan. You changing the order up on me? Okay. Fine. You may begin when you're ready, Commissioner Miller.
Good afternoon to you and then to your staff as well. My name is Christine Miller and I'm a commissioner serving ANC 1A representing Columbia Heights and more specifically single member District 5, which includes the corridor in front of DC USA, a high traffic area with a heavy concentration of sidewalk vendors. I want to thank you, one, for holding this hearing and giving us an opportunity to speak to the legislation, but also for providing that counter legislation. So I'm here to speak for both 332 and 370. And I'm also speaking consistent with ANC 1A's recently adopted resolution R2610 on sidewalk vending improvements in Columbia Heights and speaking to the legislation. I've attached those for the record. I want to begin by saying clearly and unequivocally, street vendors are essential micro entrepreneurs in Columbia Heights, and they're an integral part of our local economy. Besides their very long history as part of the neighborhood's landscape and culture, they support their families, they activate our corridor, and they contribute to our neighborhood's character. So for today, I would like to emphasize the need for a practical system with clear legal pathways for vendors and consistent rule enforcement that builds trust on both sides. It's been my experience in 1A that one of the biggest challenges has not been the absence of regulations on paper, but rather how those rules operate in practice. We've seen recurring confusion about where vending is permitted, how locations are assigned, what guidance applies, and how vendors are expected to comply day to day. At the same time, residents and businesses are also raising real concerns about sidewalk access, ADA accessibility, and safe use of shared spaces. Enforcement's necessary, but it has to be paired with a compliant system that people can actually use. We need a vending framework with clear rules, clear maps, consistent communication of those rules, language access, and predictable civil enforcement. If the district wants compliance, the system has to ensure that the expectations and consequences are understandable and achievable. And this is where I would like to emphasize the role of ANCs as partners. ANCs are the district's hyper-local elected bodies, and we are often the first place people turn when they need something from government. Residents bring us concerns about sidewalk access and shared space. Vendors came to us initially for help navigating a Kafkaesque permitting system that for years made it extremely difficult to secure legal vending and public space permits. Small businesses come to us when day-to-day corridor conditions affect their operations. In all of these ways, ANC 1A has been an on-the-ground partner and advocate in pushing for more workable, fair, and enforceable vending framework. ANCs can help the district translate that law and policy into neighborhood-level implementation by partnering on outreach, identifying those recurring problems early, and supporting education and engagement while closing communication gaps. I submitted for the record Resolution 2610 that was passed at ANC 1A's publicly noticed meeting on February 18th in support of a policy that creates lawful vending opportunities, but also is strengthening those day-to-day operation and making sure that we are having that consistent compliance and enforcement. My request is that we treat enforcement and the support for our vendors as inseparable. We want to make sure that those pathways for compliance are accessible, that there's a two-way communication between vendors and the regulators. We want to make sure that those, again, are consistently assigned and that we have well-resourced civil enforcement. In that spirit, ANC 1A urges that we advance the Bill 26-0332 as the stronger framework, of course, with the enforcement and accountability upgrades outlined in our resolution. And if council does decide to move both or decides to move B26-0370, we ask that you preserve the needed enforcement tools without the excessive punitive escalation. If ANC partnership is built into this implementation, I am very optimistic, always, that we can simultaneously to work to support our micro entrepreneurs, just like we would do any other small local business, as well as making sure that we have sidewalks that are safe. I absolutely believe we can do both. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, good afternoon, Chairperson Nadeau and members of the committee and staff. My name is Jeremy Sherman. I serve as chair of ANC 1A in Columbia Heights. Today, I'm testifying on behalf of ANC 1A for bills 332 and 370, but for the Columbia Heights Public Realm Design, I'll be testifying in my individual capacity as Commissioner for 1A04. I want to reiterate that I'm a strong supporter of street vending. But nearly 3 years after the Street Vendor Advancement Act of 2023 passed, implementation has fundamentally failed. Conditions remain virtually unchanged. What we have now isn't working for vendors, neighbors, or businesses. As Commissioner Miller said, last week, ANC 1A passed a resolution of support for B26-0332, which gets closer to what we need because it recognizes that the vending zone manager structure didn't work. ANC 1A supports the oversight committee approach, the centralized portal, the brick and mortar partnership program, and the grant authority for vendor support. But the bill has the same critical gap as the 2023 law. It doesn't establish clear enough enforcement authority and mechanisms. If implemented as drafted, I believe nothing on the ground will meaningfully change. The bill must specify which agencies have enforcement responsibility, what tools they have available, mandate that enforcement actually occurs, and provide dedicated funding and staffing to make that enforcement happen. Let me be clear about enforcement. I'm not talking about criminalization or MPD sweeps. I'm talking about some agency having the authority to say you cannot vend right here, or you cannot leave equipment in public space overnight and actually follow through. Enforcement is not harassment. It's essential to creating conditions where compliant vendors can succeed and public space functions safely for everyone. B26-0370 recognizes that enforcement tools are necessary, but overcorrects with some provisions that risk recriminalizing vending. Impoundment and seizure provisions are too aggressive and lack due process. Fines escalate too quickly. Yes, we need enforcement, but one that leads with support, not immediate punishment. What we need is legislation that pairs pathways to compliance with actual enforcement capacity, and right now, we have neither. That brings me to the Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant Vision Framework for Public Realm Design, which I strongly support. This report outlines much needed investment and changes for Columbia Heights. I do want to note that I'm a bit disappointed by the lack of awareness about this report. Many neighbors don't know it was released, and I feel this hearing may have been scheduled without enough time to spread the word and allow the community to digest it. That said, there is a lot of good stuff in here. First, vending, branding, and infrastructure. The report identifies the urgent need for branded vending equipment and infrastructure to create a more organized, vibrant vending zone. We need this, and if we establish that vendors can only operate with approved branded equipment in designated locations, enforcement becomes more straightforward. Second, Civic Plaza refurbishment. The plaza is meant to be the heart of Columbia Heights, a gathering space, a point of pride. Instead, seating is uncomfortable, lighting is dated and uninviting. There's a lack of greenery and shade, and pigeons dominate the space. Our central public space sits empty most of the time. Physical improvements must be paired with programming and activation that give residents reasons to gather and make the plaza feel alive and safe. A refurbished Civic Plaza should also include central signage, like a branded community bulletin board to facilitate community connection and pride. Third, pavers and the splash pad. Our sidewalks constantly look dirty and are difficult to maintain. Replacing them is an easy win that could weave in dedicated vendor spaces and more greenery throughout the corridor. The study mentions repair splash pad, but let me be direct, this is not a repair situation. The current splash pad lacks proper safety measures. Tiles have no traction, and the hard surface doesn't meet standards, and this has led to several injuries. We know of at least one child who required emergency care after hitting their head on the tiles. We need to replace this splash pad with a properly designed one or stop letting kids plan it altogether. Fourth, the tree canopy and green infrastructure. We need more green space along roadways and sidewalks, including fully planted tree boxes spanning entire blocks, not scattered trees. And finally, the big picture. The study calls out the need for a centralized management entity, and this is probably the most important recommendation in the entire document. So much of what's proposed requires a centralized, well-funded entity, whether a BID or a neighborhood management authority. Without that, we'll implement pieces, they won't be maintained, and we'll be back where we started. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it bears repeating. We need a management entity with dedicated resources and authority to sustain investments. If I can have 10 more seconds. I understand there's funding in the FY26 budget, and as we look ahead to FY27 budget, I urge this committee to secure more funding and prioritize the following: vending, branding, and infrastructure, civic plaza refurbishment, full paver replacement across Columbia Heights, and weave in dedicated vendor spaces, greenery, and tree canopy expansion. The vendor bills and the public realm design before you are some of the most consequential initiatives for Columbia Heights in years, and I thank you for working on them. If properly strengthened, they'll breathe new life and energy into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Nadeau and members of the committee and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to offer comments and express views on B26-0370 and B26-0332. I'm Anthony Thomas Davis, Commissioner for Single Member District 1A06, and I represent Central and East Columbia Heights as well as Civic Plaza and chair the Commission's Permanent Special Committee on Public Life and Neighborhood Planning, which has purview over public space matters. I present these views and comments as dissenting from my colleagues related to the official position the Commission took and approved at its February 18th, 2026 meeting. I support the Council's and Executive's engagement and willingness to address street vending because frankly, the status quo is failing Columbia Heights. Let me be clear at the outset. In my opinion, the Street Vendor Advancement Act of 2023 produced regulatory collapse. The law was passed with noble intentions to support vendors as micro-entrepreneurs while decriminalizing violations of vending laws. Appropriately, it forgave past debts. But in practice, I believe this law dismantled the very regulatory framework that the Vending Regulation Act of 2009 established. The consequences of this are quite visible. Every day on the 3200 block to the 3300 blocks of 14th Street. Block sidewalks that force pedestrians, including families with strollers and persons with disabilities who may use a walker or wheelchair to weave in and out of narrowed pathways. Litter and debris are often left behind by vendors, and many, many other issues, including the fact that brick and mortar businesses contend with the consequences of this failure. The mayor returned the 2023 Act unsigned, warning it created an effectively unenforceable regime where bad faith vendors can act with near impunity. This, unfortunately, has been borne out, even if not the intended consequence. I want to be clear, decriminalization, Councilmember Nadeau, was absolutely the right call. Criminal penalties for vending violations were disproportionate and harmful. Education and compliance alone, however, cannot manage hundreds of vendors, millions of pedestrians, and limited public space that is supposed to be the outcome of this reform. I also categorically reject the fix not fine approach cited by the Council's Office of Racial Equity in the 2023 Act's Racial Equity Impact Analysis, citing Beloved Community Incubator. Civil penalties with a progressive graduated schedule is necessary. I also want to be clear about the comments that my colleague made. I do believe, to the point you made in your opening statement, criminal penalties are necessary after all civil penalties has been exhausted. For these reasons, I would like to quickly run through suggested changes that I urge this committee to consider. In B26-0332, at lines 558, strike language related to stationary kiosk, as it will only continue to exacerbate the issues already faced in Columbia Heights. at lines 583 through 588 set strict size requirements for tables, carts, and kiosk. Strike language related to the Oversight Committee, which I believe sidelines the ANC. Give at lines 623 to 625 DLCP authority to issue notices of infraction as the vending zone manager. I urge this committee to maintain language in the mayor's bill, Bill 26-0370, maintaining language that prohibits open flames in sidewalk vending locations. And again, to maintain at lines 526 to 543, language for criminal penalties related to egregious violations of licensing and vending requirements. I want to note two other important changes, and I have many more in my written statement. I believe this committee should establish a centralized Office of Vending Enforcement and Management within the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, or as a standalone office subordinate to the mayor, and let all licensing, enforcement, and compliance matters to flow through this central office. And then finally, I think that a vendor success fund should be established. My colleague, Commissioner Miller, talked about all of the business support services that we would like to see. That is absolutely what we need. We need technical support. I think a fund that is established and set up that has actual fees and penalties deposited into it would help fund a lot of those activities. I just want to thank you for all of your support on trying to fix this problem, but I think we need to match enforcement and compliance with a more robust outlook on not just what this looks like in Columbia Heights, but across the district.
Thanks, Commissioner. Mr. Jordan.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure that rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic is going to get us very far. The vending zone problem that we see and other problems with pigeons and things we see in the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza and the environs are the direct result of a fundamental failure in equity, inclusion, and development. Housing policy, economic development policy. What we're really seeing is a signal of what's really going on under the surface. We allowed the development of our community. We invited developers in, and they stole. Clear and simple. We had a Main Street in place, which we asked for, and they did nothing but turn this into a drug rehab center. I don't know what to call it now. We allowed the fountain to deteriorate. The public realm was premised on agencies working together with community. DDOT did its own thing. DNPED abandoned us before things were implemented fully. In fact, the public realm we have now was a result of a community battle with the city to get it built. It didn't just happen. It wasn't put into place. Developers didn't cooperate. It was a war that we implemented. When we asked for the council's help, it did not respond with the type of help that we needed. And now you have a disintegrated community, a gentrified community, and we got what we planned for, an absolute mess. So to blame vendors trying to survive, and now we want to enforce, even if vendors were properly enforced, we would just get back to ground zero. So basically all the legislation does is get us to zero. We've wasted a decade of community building, playing games. And what we're trying to do now will do absolutely nothing but make us feel good, help us pad our resumes. This is not community building. We're more interested in building tall buildings and say how many units of housing or company. When those housing units will not support community building, it's just plugging people in widget-like. So if you destroy community, this is what you get. And what we see is a destroyed community that should have been an example for the world, for the city, and of how you build an inclusive, diverse, and equitable community. And we blew it. And now we want to blame the vendors. We want to blame agencies. We are all at fault, starting with you, starting with the previous council member, starting with the business community. We created greed, and that's what we got. So unless we're willing to make some fundamental changes of how we do things, it's not going to work. Even this legislation, I know I'm over time, but even this legislation, it's just coming down. I don't know anything about it, and I'm a busybody, so I know others don't. So learn
Thank you.
community building.
Thank you for your testimony. Commissioners, just checking on something. Have any of you been informed of the hiring of a vending zone manager? No, I'm seeing no. Okay.
No, haven't heard anything since District Bridges was removed or terminated.
And have you heard from DLCP about the forming of the advisory committee?
No.
Okay. What has your communication been like with DLCP? Because Director Crow mentioned earlier that DLCP meets regularly with ANC, but it sounds like you all still have several recommendations that haven't been implemented.
Yeah, if I can speak first briefly on it. We, in the start of 2025, we asked DLCP Director Crow and Ms. Mims to come to our committee, ANC meetings every other month and give us updates. This was at the time that the vending zone map was coming out. District Bridges, the RFP was being issued. District Bridges came on. So that was a great set of meetings. We were very engaged. After the map kind of never went anywhere, and then after District Bridges sort of dissolved as the vending zone manager, we did not have more regular and continued engagement with DLCP.
Got it.
Councilmember, I did want to note, so we adopted a resolution, I believe it was in, winter of 2025. DLCP was regularly coming to our meetings almost every other month. To the extent that we were getting substantive updates, that was a different story, but they were appearing before us. I did meet directly with Director Crow and her team to examine some of the issues we were directly hearing about, the intersection at 14th and Irving, and just general issues after the Jersey barrier enforcement campaign went into effect. I have found the agency to be forthcoming, even if they do not have substantive updates. So to the extent that you're asking about their willingness to engage, I have always saw the intention on at least trying to listen. Now, taking that feedback and trying to operationalize it with solutions, I think that's a little bit of a different story.
Commissioner Sherman, in your testimony, you mentioned you think impoundment of vending materials is too strong of an enforcement tool. Okay, so, but walk me through the alternatives, because we also, well, two of you don't think that we should seek, criminal action. So what do we do? Like, where's the line to get what we're trying to get here?
Yeah, it is a fine line, right? We need enforcement. If you're not properly licensed with several warnings, if you're not putting your items away after you're done, like, then there should be consequences for that. I think the impoundment and seizure provisions were, like, the way I interpreted them were that if you're incompliant, then you can take all your stuff while you're there operating like live. I don't know that that feels like a positive step, but there still does need to be enforcement. I noted in earlier testimony that we're seeing materials left in public space.
Yeah.
If you do that, even if you're a permitted vendor, like, that should be a warning, or there should be some sort of civil infraction that happens. They're like, this is not proper etiquette and not proper compliance with the law, and we need to begin to enforce those things. So as I mentioned, I think 370 takes it a step too far, but potentially 332 doesn't go far enough.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Okay. One of the things that struck me from the public life study too is it kind of doubled down on some of the things we've been talking about. It's nice to have in writing. I mean, if we get a vending zone manager back, I mean, District Bridges was about to start doing branded tents and things like that, right? So if we create the public realm that we want for vendors, then you don't have some of these issues anyway, right? Like if we're providing tents and they say Columbia Heights vending zone, then, we don't have this issue of people having to lock their tents up because they don't have anywhere to put them, right? So I feel like we have a path here that is better than an enforcement regime if we can get there. I don't know.
Yeah.
It wasn't a question, but.
Yeah, no, really quick reaction to that. I completely agree. And I think that's a very positive step. I'm excited about that. I do think what happens when a vendor is operating without the approved materials is how is that handled? Who is the agency or parties that deal with the consequences? What if someone does have the vended stuff, but they're not in an approved space?
Right.
Like those are the instances where it's creating the congestion. So I think branding will take us far, and I agree it can be an enforcement tool, but there's still other pieces that are gaps.
For sure. I think it's also about creating that culture and community, like Mr. Jordan was saying, where there's accountability among vendors for each other too. Because I think that there's always outliers, but I think the structure is not there yet. It's not cohesive. So we haven't even seen where we could go with the carrots. Okay. On the study, I agree with everybody that it has not been widely enough publicized yet. And we are doing this hearing because we need to continue moving the vending bills, and the vending study is in there, right? But we want to work with the ANC and OP to promote this even more. And it's not legislation, right? It's a study. And in that study, like, public life studies and small area plans before it, is something that could be a blueprint for all of our elected officials and community leaders to build off of for years to come. So I'm excited that it's done. I had to basically do a sit-in on the 3rd floor to get it released, but it's with us now, right? And so feel free to share it far and wide. What else about the public life study surprised folks here, or what recommendations are you most excited about?
Well, I'll jump in and I appreciate Commissioner Sherman adding this comment into his testimony. But yeah, I thought the use of that fountain as a splash pad, I think has to be revisited, and just renovating it and doing the same thing with glazed tiles and water. And as a parent, those flip-flops have no traction. And it was one of my neighbors whose child fell. And if there had not been a pediatric neurosurgeon in the hospital at the time, he wouldn't have made it. So it's serious. These head injuries are no joke. It's been a problem since before you, when it first came in under Graham, and we've never even put a traction covering on it, or paint or anything that would give it some grit. The splash pads that I took my kids to all had soft surfaces.
Right.
This does not. And so I think really, if we want to brand it as a splash pad, then we have to uphold the same standards that DPR puts on every single splash pad in this city.
And it doesn't even have to be a soft surface. Like if you look at the LaDroit Park one, it's just cement, which isn't slippery.
Right. And I think Edgewood has the same thing with its fountain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But not slippery, not glazed tiles. Yeah.
Yeah, Councilmember, I wanted to quickly chime in. As I represent Civic Plaza, I know very well the range of challenges there. And I'm actually looking at your staff member because I know just between the two of us and just the incredible work of your staff over the years, hundreds of hours have been poured into what is less than 2 acres of land in terms of just trying to manage what that can look like, right? What is the untapped potential there? So I'm actually excited about the vision that the Office of Planning has laid out. Something that you talked about, like what shocked us. I actually want to speak for my colleague, Commissioner Jaspal Bhatia. He actually also called out something that I found quite shocking, right? That the the kind of stickiness of our various spaces, right? Women don't feel welcome in a lot of our spaces across Columbia Heights. That was a telling finding. And I think that that is something that I hope the Office of Planning will work with us on to solve. Vending was identified as a solution to that problem because, to be quite frank, a lot of our vendors are women. And them, carrying on with their businesses actually invite a lot of other women into those spaces. So that was quite telling. I just want to emphasize, because I know your predecessor had a hand in the 2004 plan, and a lot was accomplished from that. Some things fell through the cracks. I'd actually want to pose a question back to you to potentially raise with the Office of Planning of what will a sustained investment and implementation framework look like, right? Because a lot was accomplished in those early years of the 2004, plan after construction kind of started and completed following 2008. But then around 2015, things just tapered off and we never saw any additional investments. And so I'd love to understand what is an investment timeline, a realistic investment timeline, right? I know you've already secured some money in the FY26 budget. I'm hopeful that there will be something in the FY27 budget. But what can we expect? And then what should we be doing also from a public-private partnership perspective to maybe bring some of these business leaders further along in this conversation? Because I think this is a dynamic start to what can be, I think, the resurgence of this neighborhood, but it's going to require concerted investment and a lot of implementation partners. And so to the extent that we can help kind of track and move that over the next 5 to 10 years and make sure that it actually happens, I think we'll be in a very, very good place 20 years from now.
Very good. Thank you to this panel. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next panel includes Crispus Gordon, the third Vice President of Government Relations and Strategic Affairs with Monumental Sports and Entertainment, Kristen Kane, Network Director of Beloved Community Incubator, and Jeff Gilbert, Legal and Technical Assistance Director of Beloved Community Incubator. I can turn those all off. Yeah. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau. Councilmember Nadeau, members of the Committee on Public Works and Operations, thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding Bill 26-0332, the Vending Modernization Amendment Act of 2025, and Bill 26-0370, the Vending Compliance and Modernization Amendment Act of 2025. I am Crispus Gordon III, Vice President of Government Relations and Strategic Engagement for Monumental Sports and Entertainment. MSC is one of the most innovative sports and entertainment companies in the country, with one of the most diverse partnership groups in all of sports. MSC owns and operates the Washington Wizards, Washington Mystics, the Capital City Go-Go, Wizards District Gaming, and the 2018 NHL Stanley Cup champions, Washington Capitals, which I know, Councilmember Nadeau, you love very much. Monumental Sports and Entertainment also operates Capital One Arena in downtown DC and Care First Arena located in Ward 8. Since opening in 1997, Capital One Arena has been a cornerstone of the District of Columbia's economy, generating nearly $1 billion in tax revenue. Capital One Arena attracts nearly 3 million fans annually. These visitors boost the district's economy by staying in our hotels, dining in our restaurants, and shopping in our stores. As we continue to attract fans to the many events that take place at Capital One Arena, we want to ensure they are experiencing a great time at the arena. Part of that equation is ensuring that unlicensed vendors are not harassing patrons or setting up along the perimeter of the arena. Many of these unlicensed vendors are selling fake merchandise to the patrons at a severely discounted rate. This in turn not only tricks the customer into believing they received a good deal, but it deprives the district of much needed tax revenue if they had purchased the items in our store, which is located in the arena. We believe that enforcement of a vending-free zone around the arena is paramount to not only our overall success, but the district's as well. Our security team is willing to work with MPD or whoever is a designee to identify those who are illegally vending. Measures such as confiscation of fake material and removal of the person from the area should be included in the final legislation. MSC strives to keep the environment around the arena safe and hospitable to fans, whether they are attending a Caps game, Wizards game, or a concert, so they can enjoy a memorable experience and hopefully come back again. On behalf of Ted Leonsis, our employees, athletes, and partners, we appreciate and thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, for your leadership and service to the District of Columbia. We are honored to stand as partners with you and the council together. Together, we can continue to forge a legacy that strengthens our community and cements the District of Columbia as a global leader in sports and entertainment. Thank you for your time and attention, and we look forward to answering any questions that you or the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Kane.
Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, for this opportunity. My name is Kristen Kane. I am the Network Director of the Beloved Community Incubator, and we've been supporting over 35 vendors, largely within the Columbia Heights vending zone, to successfully get vending license. Thus far, we have been able to get 20 people to be fully licensed, not without hours of direct support with the vendors and years of working with DCLP, OTR, and DOH to be clear on how to even get these licenses. And just want to note that we still continue to have challenges with license, especially when delays are made within one of the agencies, like if it's a microhome enterprise kitchen license, a food license, those require multiple different permits to get to the end of the license. And what we're seeing happen is that part of the beginning process of a license is to create a tax account. So a vendor will create a tax account. You can delay that for 90 days. And then the process is taking longer and they start to incur debt for minimum quarterly sales tax debt. When we then go to DCLP to get a statement of account to be able to provide to the Office of Tax and Revenue, what happens is we're seeing that these tax accounts are being closed, and then we're caught in limbo between DCLP and OTR. So just really want to reiterate some of the interagency continued challenges as people are trying to be compliant with the license process. I also want to highlight that I now have heard in recent days that there is a vending zone manager. I've yet to be introduced to the vending zone manager or know any vendor that's been introduced to the vending zone manager. I would love to know what DCLP's plan is for a functional space and system using a vending zone manager, because to me, that's been an absolute key to many of the problems that have been stated today has been the lack of having a vending zone manager. And I'm still looking forward to being clear on standards around carts and table setup. So much of what was addressed in earlier testimonies, we too would like to know what the standard process is so that we can support vendors to actually have those standard tables and carts and to have the unified look that would be beneficial to Columbia Heights. Just also want to name that in December, the first round of vendors that we supported in getting licensed will be up for renewal. That's how long this process has been taking. And there'll be compliance concerns because the minimum quarterly sales tax is such a challenge for vendors, especially because many of them haven't been vending either due to the cold or to the current climate within the district. And with that, wanted to name that generally we would always have vendors testifying during these oversight hearings. And due to the current climate, their vendors are fearful to stand up and make their stories heard. So just wanted to name the absences due to fear. And I will pass it to my colleague, Jeff.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Councilmember Nadeau and the committee for the opportunity to speak and address these issues. My name's Jeff Gilbert. I'm the Legal and Technical Assistance Director at Beloved Community Incubator. We organize with and support DC street vendors, primarily vendors based in Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant. I want to begin by acknowledging that DLCP has started to make some serious progress on implementing the new street vending law in Columbia Heights, in the Columbia Heights Mount Pleasant vending zone. So just want to acknowledge Director Crow when you speak later. We know that there has been progress that has been made. Between October 1st, 2023, when the law first went into effect, and late January 2025, about a year ago, only 2 vendors of the roughly 40 vendors who sell in the zone had received licenses. Since then, over about the last year, about 20 additional vendors who sell in Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant have received or are very close to receiving a license. It would be a shame if the council were to allow punitive aspects of the 2 bills under consideration to undermine this progress. The mayor proposed the text of B26-0370. The bill seeks to restore DLCP's punitive powers to criminalize street vending without a license, just explicitly criminalize it, expands DLCP's powers to seize vendors' property, and seeks to almost double the maximum civil fine for vending without a license for the first offense from $2,000 to $3,500. B26-0332 is a much better bill, though we're concerned that it could also effectively recriminalize street vending. The text of the bill provides discretion to DLCP staff to call MPD to enforce civil vending regulations if a vendor is not able to show DLCP staff a required license or permit information, and if DLCP staff at their own discretion determines that the vendor is not being cooperative. We've witnessed countless dysfunctional interactions between DLCP staff and street vendors over the years, the root of which is an overcomplicated license application process that DLCP just simply has not been able to effectively manage. There hasn't been a path for vendors who want to be in compliance to actually be in compliance. Providing this discretion to DLCP staff would effectively recriminalize vending without a license. If the council permits DLCP to involve MPD again, we just know that the impact will be poor on working class Black and brown people, will be targeted and brought into dangerous interactions with MPD with potentially very serious, dangerous collateral consequences. There's no need to involve MPD anymore. We also want to raise the committee's attention to two incredibly important issues that B26-0332 does not adequately address. First, we're incredibly concerned that DLCP has taken so long to hire a vending zone manager, which was required under law more than 2 years ago. I also had not heard until I saw Director Crow's written response before this hearing about a vending zone manager being hired, and I'm pretty sure no vendors who sell in the zone are aware of this. Without a vending zone manager, DLCP has had no process for making visible to vendors the available sites in the zone and has had no plan to navigate the very real public space use concerns with respect to sidewalk congestion on 14th Street in Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant. Their inability to have a vending zone manager in place has continued to cause serious harm. DLCP also continues to claim in violation of the law that vending is not allowed on 14th Street between the entrance to DC USA Mall and the corner with Irving Street Northwest. That just has no basis in the law and shouldn't be allowed. B22, this bill's inclusion of a Columbia Heights Mount Pleasant vending zone oversight committee seems like a good start. The council should create an oversight committee as soon as possible, we believe, with local ANC representation. The vending zone was never intended to function without a vending zone manager, and it's just incredibly disingenuous that DLCP continues to blame vendors for dysfunctional space use in the vending zone. There needs to be real teeth behind oversight efforts to push DLCP to follow the law, and sadly, DLCP just has not been acting in good faith, and I don't use that lightly. Like, they really have not been acting in good faith. Second, the council should reduce the inequitable street vendor minimum quarterly sales tax, which threatens to force the vendors who have been able to come into compliance out of compliance. Street vendors are the only business owners in DC who are charged a flat minimum sales tax regardless of sales volume. The minimum quarterly sales tax is just so high that it's almost impossible for many street vendors to pay for a variety of reasons. To pay the same 6% sales tax as all other retail businesses, Class B merchandise vendors would have to bring in more than $25,000 of gross revenue per year. Many merchandise vendors just don't make anywhere close to $25,000. To pay the 10% sales taxes as all other food businesses, Class A food vendors would have to bring in more than $15,000. And many food vendors who sell cut fruit and other small snacks make way less than $15,000 per year. Vending is also a seasonal business. Foot traffic and sales are significantly lower in the winter, the fourth and first quarters of the year. Many vendors support low-income households and simply just don't have disposable cash around in the winter months to pay sales tax when they are generating very low sales. So the seasonality is a huge issue. Additionally, many vendors sell part-time or have to take time off from work for a variety of reasons due to sickness, care for family members, are not able to pay the same amount when they're not bringing in money. So the council should create a fair mechanism to lower the minimum quarterly sales tax so vendors can be in compliance with license requirements and also paying sales tax.
Thank you.
There was a few issues I wanted to address from the first panel, but I'll leave that for another time. Appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thank you both for your testimony. Truly appreciate it. And Mr. Gordon, just Bill 26-332 would allow for a theater, sports, or entertainment venue to act as an official vending zone manager. Is that something Monumental might be interested in pursuing?
Yeah, we'll probably look at that internally. And the goal for us really is to, have a space around the arena that and we want to separate it from Columbia Heights. Like that's totally separate.
Yeah.
We
No, I
experience.
get it.
And so no opinion on that. But what we've experienced over the course of the last, really probably since the arena opened, pretty much is individuals right there at the metro station selling
Yeah.
material. And we're not in the business of trying to send anyone to 19th and D. That's not our goal. But we just want to ensure that this place is managed properly.
For sure. One thing that struck me from your testimony, though, is the unlicensed merchandise, which is like it crosses into some other legal scenarios. So that's illegal under DC trademark counterfeiting law and carries criminal penalties, which is sort of separate and apart from the street vending itself. Is that something Monumental has pursued with MPD or OAG?
So we've worked with, give an example for concerts, for instance. Usually the promoter will have something, they'll take care of that themselves, but for stuff in the league, like the NHL or the NBA,
Yeah,
really puts our security team in a challenging position. We don't want to have a confrontation with the vendor over unlicensed material. And we've even went so far as to tell a vendor, look, just go a block or two away.
Got it.
We don't want to.
So it's more about I got it. It's the area.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it. Well, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you all for your testimony. Appreciate it very much. We are now going to be joined by two government witnesses. Radhika Mohan, Deputy Director of Development, Design, and Preservation, and Tiffany Crow, Director of the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection. So I ask you to come up to the witness table, and we'll swear you back in, Director Crow, and swear you in for the first time, Ms. Mohan. All right, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty? Hold on, I'll wait till you, yep. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, okay, here we go. Who wants to go first for testimony? You don't have any oral testimony. That's totally fine. Great, go for it. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, there you go. Now you're on. Never mind.
Staff. Yeah, we didn't know the exact setup, so we read it. My name is Tiffany Crow, Director of the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, and I'm here to testify in support of Mayor Bowser's legislation, Bill 26-0370, the Vending and Compliance Modernization Amendment Act of 2025, the mayor's proposal. I will also present testimony on Bill 26-0332, the Vending Modernization Amendment Act of 2025. Both proposals support legal vending and the vibrancy that local vendors bring the district. They also provide the district with enforcement authority to hold illegal vendors accountable and to address health and safety risks they present. As we prepare for the America 250 celebrations, which will attract hundreds of thousands of tourists and visitors to the district over the coming months, it is important that the district has a robust vending regulatory system in place with streamlined licensing processes and strong accountability measures. In an effort to support vendors, in 2023, the council passed DC Law 25-21, the Street Vendor Advancement Act, which removed criminal penalties for violating the district's vending laws and established the Columbia Heights Mount Pleasant Vending Zone and the Vendor Amnesty Program. This law resulted in a number of consequences that present substantial health and safety risks to district residents and visitors. For example, unlicensed food truck vendors who are vending illegally along the National Mall present substantial public safety risks. They are frequently parked in bike lanes and crosswalks. They block fire hydrants, driveways, and entrances outside the Smithsonian museums and federal offices. Unlicensed food truck operators have prevented licensed food truck operators from using their licensed spots by leaving junk cars overnight in the spots so that licensed vendors or anyone looking for a parking space will not be able to use them. The situation has, on multiple occasions, become simply chaotic. Several unlicensed food trucks have caught fire. Fights have broken out between unlicensed vendors, and customers have been scammed by paying more for purchases than they were told. The problem is not limited to just the National Mall or food trucks. Unlicensed street and sidewalk vendors present similar risks. DLCP frequently receives complaints from businesses expressing frustration with vendors who set up their stands in front of their entrances, preventing customers from easily entering or leaving. Unlicensed sidewalk vendors often block sidewalks and crosswalk ramps, making it challenging for pedestrians with ambulatory challenges and exposing the district to liability from the Americans with Disabilities Act. Unlicensed food vendors, including food trucks, present health risks such as food poisoning because they ignore DC health codes and avoid health inspections. Unlicensed vendors, whether on sidewalks or in food trucks, don't pay their fair share. They don't pay sales taxes as licensed vendors do, business license fees as licensed vendors do, or health certificate fees as licensed vendors must. Supporting unlicensed vendors cannot come at the risk of harming district residents, visitors, and businesses. The agency's efforts, however, have not been limited to enforcement. We started with an inclusive effort to get everyone licensed. We have engaged in robust efforts to help vendors become or remain licensed. For instance, DLCP has hosted vendor-specific outreach events in all wards to assist vendors with obtaining a license. In some instances, vendors were issued a vending license on the spot. In addition, every other month, DLCP meets with the beloved Community Incubator to assist vendors with applying for vending licenses. Further, we have partnered with the Office of Tax and Revenue to help vendors apply for the Vendor Amnesty Program. Our collective efforts are reflected in the 21% increase of new vending licenses issued in fiscal year 2025. Compared to the prior fiscal year and the increase in vendor participation in the Vendor Amnesty Program, we've seen great progress. And we are proud of what we have accomplished, but the district requires more tools to improve the market. This is why DLCP supports the vending modernization proposals that are shared in the mayor's proposal and adopted in Councilmember Nadeau's proposal. These include no longer requiring an applicant to identify a site at the application stage of the vending license. Under both proposals, a licensed vendor would be able to vend from any lawful vending spot in the city. This proposal would make it easier for individuals to obtain a vending license while at the same time encouraging vendors to vend in new spots throughout the city as opposed to being clustered in certain locations. Establishing mobile vending locations. Both proposals establish mobile vending zones throughout the city that would be dedicated to food truck operators. What we have heard from mobile vendors is that there are not enough locations for food trucks. This bill addresses that. Expanding sidewalk vending zones. Both proposals support our goal of spreading vendors throughout the district while reducing some of the regulatory burdens that vendors face. Those operating within the zone would be able to vend anywhere within the zone. Further, food vendors would be able to vend from tables, which is not the case for sidewalk vendors. Additionally, it would allow sidewalk vending zone to be managed by a for-profit or a nonprofit organization to encourage more applicants. While both proposals share positive attributes like the ones I just mentioned, they differ critically on matters of enforcement. Operators that flagrantly disobey the law and vend in public space illegally pose a grave risk to the public, and DLCP is charged with protecting the public. From day one of my taking on this position, my team and I have received numerous complaints about unlicensed vendors across the district. Our federal partners, including the Smithsonian Institution and National Park Service, regularly identify illegally parked, unlicensed food truck vendors along the National Mall, continuing to block crosswalks, fire hydrants, entrances, loading docks, presenting health and safety hazards to pedestrians. For example, the two food trucks that caught fire a year ago were both unlicensed. Had they been properly licensed, they would have been inspected by the Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department and DC Health. These illegal food trucks also contribute to large volumes of trash that overwhelm the NPS maintained trash cans along the National Mall, resulting in a huge increase in rats and presenting a poor image of the city. While both proposals share positive attributes like the ones I just mentioned, they differ critically on matters of enforcement. Operators that flagrantly disobey the law and vend in public space illegally pose a grave risk to the public. However, the district's current enforcement mechanisms are insufficient to curb bad behavior. DLCP needs additional enforcement tools as set forth in the mayor's proposal, such as enhanced civil penalties for unlicensed vendors. Unlicensed vending is a Class 1 infraction, which carries a $2,549 fine. Although the fine is adjusted annually based on the Consumer Price Index for all consumers in the Washington metropolitan statistical area, it is too low to be a deterrent. For many vendors, particularly unlicensed food truck operators who make thousands of dollars a day and fail to pay any taxes, paying the civil fine is the price of doing business. Civil fines must be high enough to discourage bad actors from repeatedly engaging in illegal activity. Altered criminal infractions. The mayor's proposal would make the following acts criminal misdemeanor offenses. A, vending without a license, permit, or other authorization. B, vending from an unauthorized location. C, falsifying a license, permit, or other authorization, failing to produce a vending license or other required authorization. And E, failing to produce identification. Given the egregious threats to public health and safety, as I've mentioned several times, these violations need strong accountability to deter bad actors. On multiple occasions, DLCP inspectors have been threatened by unlicensed vendors. We also have numerous unlicensed vendors who ignore civil fines or pay them and continue the same illegal activities. We need a strong deterrent for repeated unlawful behavior by bad actors. An expedited hearing process when goods are seized or the food truck is towed and impounded is the third tenet. The mayor's proposal would allow vendors whose goods, merchandise, and equipment are seized or food trucks that are towed and impounded to request an expedited hearing from the Office of Administrative Hearings, authorizing hearing decisions within 10 business days. This process is vital to the operators as we expand enforcement to give them due process and is also consistent with other district laws, such as for summary closures and summary suspensions. We recognize that addressing illegal vending is not easy, and we appreciate the council's and particularly this committee's willingness to work with us in this effort. The mayor's proposal is designed to support entrepreneurs who want to start their own businesses and operate legally. Encouraging compliance with the district's laws and regulations creates a safer marketplace where district consumers are protected and businesses have certainty. The mayor's proposal strikes the appropriate balance of supporting the vibrancy of our local vending market while protecting the health, safety, and welfare of consumers and residents. We strongly encourage the council to move this measure forward as quickly as possible so the district has an effective vending regulatory system in place for the America 250 celebrations that start in a few months. We are committed to continuing to work with council on this issue for the larger community 365 days a year. Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, for allowing me to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the framework for public realm design provided a number of recommendations related to street vending, and I want to get an update on DLCP's progress on each recommendation. Many of these recommendations mirror things that I've been asking for along with other members of the community. So the report recommends designating vendor-friendly spots along 14th Street and that zones have clear markers to enhance visibility for enforcement. The report also outlines the existing regulations and finally provides a map of vending spots in the zone. So first question, is this map publicly posted in a place where vendors and the community members can access it?
It was posted. I don't know if there's a new one up, but we did post it as it was supposed to be posted based on the one that we worked with District Bridges. I don't know if there still is one, but I'll check.
Okay. Do you know where it is posted or where it was posted?
I'll have to check.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. What about the plans to visually designate approved vending spots? I know you sent me a proof of approved vending spot signs back in fall of 2024. Are those going to go up?
I would love for them to. We'd love to like paint on the sidewalk.
Yeah,
We'd
yeah.
love to do designs. I think When we spoke, it was before kind of the change in budget status, the hole in the district's budget. So we were working with our sister agencies. We even reached out to the Commission on the Arts and Humanities to see if we could get someone to do it for free. But also, I think people believe it's not appropriate to ask an artist to do work for the district for free. So we completely support that recommendation, both when you proposed it, when we proposed it back to you, and in the Office of Planning study. So for us, it's mainly a matter of resources and coordination with other agencies to get that done.
Okay. Do you have a number, a budget number?
I can tell you what the estimate that we got from like a painter was, and then DDOT will create the signs for us, but they were working on streeteries and had other priorities. So I think we could both get you the cost and timing after this hearing.
Great. At last year's performance oversight hearing, you announced that vendors in the zone would be able to vend in any approved spot rather than being assigned a spot. Is that still the practice?
That is still the practice. And Kalechi, who works with Beloved Community Incubator, and Renal, who works with the ANCs, work to make sure that when people are licensed, they understand those guidelines.
Okay, so it's the humans that help them figure out where they can go?
It's the humans who say, hey, here's the map of the vending zone. As long as you're in a legal location that is not already allocated to someone who had a previous license, then you can vend anywhere in the zone.
The next recommendation is that DLCP establish an interagency street vending task force that could focus on many things, including developing integrated permit and license approval systems and providing wraparound services. Is there a plan to do that?
So we actually did that. I had a manager specifically assigned to do interagency coordination, not just with district agencies, but with our federal partners. And they did several, they call them blitzes. I don't love to call it a blitz because it's a recurring enforcement activity. A blitz makes it seem like it's an event. These were things that we did on a regular basis, coordinated internally with DC government as well as our federal partners. And those were focused on enforcement. And then on the other end of things with licensing, we have someone, Kalechi, again, he works with Department of Health, DDOT, and all of the agencies that OTR that are required to get licensed. So the funding provided for the vending zone sort of temporarily while we worked on this legislation together, it provided for a single grade 11 FTE. And what we actually had to do was assign that work to a manager to work on the field portion. Another manager works on the licensing portion. And then Anissa's team works on the day-to-day enforcement activity.
So that's still going on?
It is.
Okay. We were all kind of surprised to hear that DLCP's promoted a staff member to serve as a vending zone manager. When did it happen and what has the manager been doing?
I mean, I think that those are the three people that I spoke with. Like one of those folks was not a manager before, and we recognized that we needed this role, someone who could direct people. So we took the funding that was allocated, which was a grade 11. This person was a grade 13, but we just made him a manager, paid the difference. Like it wasn't enough to support the full position, but we also were able to like allocate some of the work amongst other staff. So
there is a person whose only job right now is vending zone manager?
There is a person whose only job is doing the things that a vending zone manager would do. One of the proposals about allowing the vending zone manager to do enforcement, I think that would be helpful. Like right now, our person who's the manager of vending licensing does not do any enforcement activities. He will go do site visits. He'll work with vendors. He works with our comms team and enforcement to do the work. But I would say the term vending zone manager, I wouldn't use that to describe him because he manages vending licensing among other things. A grade 11 was not enough to have a vending zone manager, kind of like even district bridges, that funding was not enough to support what they needed to do. So we couldn't have a person using that funding do the vending zone manager job, but we have allocated all the work of the vending zone manager within the agency.
What is that person's title?
Program manager.
And then
13.
What other responsibilities does that person have?
Other licensing, he focuses primarily on vending licensing right now, but he also does basic business licensing. There are several managers in that team, so they support one another, but he has become the expert in vending management. And I did hear the recommendation of one of the panelists about creating a distinct vending, I don't know, unit. The district tried that before. I don't know if anybody remembers, but there was a vending unit before. Anissa was the manager of that unit, and that comes with its own distinct challenges.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like you have one person who is a vending zone manager for Columbia Heights. Sounds like you have a person who is managing vending licenses and BBLs for everywhere.
Yeah, I would say we could call them the vending zone manager, but then we couldn't ask him to do anything else. So,
But that was the point.
I mean, I think that's the point with, I did explain how much money it would take to do that position. Like, we needed to hire a manager who was like a grade 13, and we got funding for a grade 11 and no other vacancies.
Okay.
So I think I felt like we actually did more than what the vending zone manager role did. But if calling that person the vending zone manager is like more in line with what you believe.
No,
the
that's
intent
not the
of law
point. The
is,
point is the responsibilities and the focus.
he has those, like, he has all of the responsibilities.
For
and
Columbia
focus.
Heights only, doing this only.
That is the area where 90% of the licenses come through. Like, but I hear what you're saying, and I will go back and look to see how we can reallocate the work to make sure that someone only does this.
I mean, I think it's a conversation, like if this was up and running and it was going great and we were like, yeah, we checked all those boxes, then maybe, then it's someone who does more than one thing, but like, that's just not where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think I decided to reset for this hearing because our intent is always to, one, be in compliance with the law and make it work. I think the structure of the vending zone manager as it is, even before when we had a vending zone manager that was that was
Yeah.
a vendor, then when we assigned someone in the agency to be the vending zone manager, they also couldn't do the enforcement part of it. They were dealing with the Columbia Heights licenses and vendors, and then the volume dropped, like, for a variety of reasons. So to have a single FTE that was doing that at the time only did not make sense. And I believe that allocating additional resources to, like, additional tasks to him made sense. So I think what we struggle with is practical, logical use of resources in its entirety and accomplishing the goal, and just doing the thing exactly as prescribed, even if it doesn't fit the circumstances. And maybe we could communicate a little bit better. But we hired someone to do the work of the vending zone manager. We promoted someone who could do the work of the vending zone manager. And he's taken it on, and the folks who testified will tell you that they know who he is, he helps, he does all those things.
Yeah, but they didn't know he was the vending zone manager.
Because the law is very clear, I would say, about the nonprofit being the vending zone manager and all of those things. And so while we were in this state of flux, I interpreted our conversations and what happened as do the job, do what it requires, and then we're trying to figure out the legislation. So we weren't trying to skirt the requirement. We actually, I believe, went above and beyond in having 3 different people doing the work of the vending zone manager and identifying someone to be the point of contact.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think
I thought we had given you the authority to do it officially in the last budget. So, maybe we just need to clear some stuff up and we can move
that's
on
fine.
and
Yep.
keep going because we've got.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, great. Okay. Oh, does the person serving as the vending zone manager speak Spanish?
No.
Okay.
I will ask. Not to my knowledge. He hasn't listed that as one of his skills, but as you know, we have several team members who speak Spanish who attend the conversations. When people ask for an interpreter, we have the language line. We've done additional training for all of our staff on the language line, including the individuals who are supporting vending at the agency. So,
Okay. In your testimony, you said we need to bring back MPD enforcement because DLCP enforcement's not working. We've heard testimony about issues with DLCP enforcement, including unlicensed brick and mortar businesses and housing code violations. Why has DLCP not asked MPD enforcement for those other issues? Asked for MPD enforcement for those other issues and just street vending?
so there's a default that, so if we are going to look into a rooming house that we believe to be dangerous, MPD comes without hesitation. We have good relationships with MPD and MPD officers, and the chief is supportive of the work that DLCP does. They have clear authority in those areas, so they come with us when we support ABCA for cannabis. They come with us for like clubs. We've had to do some like club stings, and they come with us for that. So it's not that we have challenges with MPD support. It's specific to vending.
Okay. I'm going to move on to some questions about the study. Can you walk me through OP's process for monitoring implementation of reports it puts out?
Yes. Well, good afternoon. My name is Radhika Mohan. I'm the Deputy Director for Design, Development, and Preservation at the Office of Planning, and I started very recently at the end of December. And I'm pleased to speak on behalf of our Urban Design Division's work on the Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant Vision Framework for Public Realm Design. Just to touch on the actual plan and the efforts to promote the plan, we've been waiting for a translation of the plan in Spanish, which I can tell you is hot off the press and on the website as of this morning.
Excellent.
And now that that's up, our team will be going on a roadshow to present it to all the stakeholders that were involved, and also the agencies that were involved in the plan are aware that it's out and the recommendations within it. From here, our Office of Planning will be hosting quarterly convenings with the agencies that were involved in developing the framework. And at those convenings, we will continue to advance the implementation activities that were outlined in the plan. That may look like helping agencies to prioritize some of those recommendations as they move through their capital budgets.
Great. The study and many of our conversations about vending started before the current presidential administration and federal immigration enforcement. How has that impacted both DLCP's work and OP's work? And how do you think that informs the findings of OP's study?
Who are you asking?
Okay, so how does the Trump administration, federal immigration enforcement impact the findings of the study and the work that you do on enforcement?
Well, I think the study had a lot of public engagement involved. What we did related to that engagement was help prioritize what the feedback that came out of that into the recommendations of the study. We may have to look at, those in light of the changes that have happened, not just here in, DC, but all over the country.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we worked to make it clear that we are not doing immigration enforcement. Our goal is to make sure that people comply with the laws of the District of Columbia related to vending, and that they are following the laws from DC Health and FEMS. And so that is what we focused on and have been focused on.
Thank you. I want to review the advancing the first moves action items on page 10 of the report in more detail. Study options to improve safety for all road users and reduce bus travel time between Irving and Kenyon on 14th Street, and coordinate with ongoing DDOT bus priority projects. Can you discuss the engagement you had with DDOT since launching the study, and how much does the proposed bus priority project incorporate your recommendations?
Yeah, so DDOT was involved in the study and will continue to involve them through these quarterly meetings to follow up on implementation activities. As you know, the study was just completed and the translation's up, so we haven't had a chance to circle back on that yet, but we'll plan on doing so.
Okay, so was any of what you recommended sort of coincidentally incorporated into the proposed bus priority projects?
I'm not quite, enhanced bus stops were part, I believe, of the study. And DDOT was, obviously involved and consulted and approved that recommendation. The next stop would be for DDOT to coordinate with WMATA on any other improvements.
Okay.
So we'll continue to monitor that and the progress at our quarterly meetings.
So for the Civic Plaza, the action items include piloting street closures and saying that it says that DLCP and the vending zone manager are key stakeholders here. Why are street closures considered in DLCP's purview to implement and not DDOT?
I believe at the time that the study was completed, it was envisioned that the vending zone manager would be responsible for applying for the street closure
Okay.
as part of their duties.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And Director Crow, under the current model with the vending zone manager, is that something that you think DLCP can be responsible for?
Yes, they've already been, so the two individuals, Chris Burnett and Kalechi, have been working very closely together on both the proposals for the physical space for vending. And that's not just in Columbia Heights. It is Columbia Heights focused a lot of the time. But the changes that need to be made, reviewing sort of the recommendations from before and this one, as well as working with specific location issues. So I have no doubt that we will be able to do it. Our agency works very closely with the Office of Planning on this and other things.
Okay. Has OP engaged with HCMA and the City Administrator's Office on the Vehicular Terrorism Safety Task Force about pilot street closures for Civic Plaza?
No, we engaged MPD, but once street closures are planned related to the implementation, they'll be one of the reviewing bodies,
Okay.
HCMA.
The next action item for Civic Plaza is to repair the splash pad and initiate plaza redesign process with DPR listed as a stakeholder. Has a plaza redesign process been included in DPR's pipeline?
We're unsure today, but we'll continue to push that through the implementation meetings, the quarterly implementation meetings that we'll have with DPR.
Okay. For the Metro Plaza, the action item is to pilot vending integration. The topic of vending spots at the Metro Plaza has been long discussed by this committee and various community members. What recent conversations have DLCP and WMATA had about the issue and opportunities for vendors on the Metro Plaza? And I guess OP, if you have any info on that, that's fine too.
I think we've more communicated with DPR about the plaza, from last year, and they were working on an MOU with them, and the study kind of changes that if there's going to be work on it.
Yeah.
I think with WMATA, our interaction with them has primarily been in the enforcement realm. I think we haven't actioned like after the study. Some of these we've already been doing.
Right.
But the WMATA specific one, we focus on enforcement when we deal with WMATA.
Right.
I'm trying to read you.
Yes. So, right. Okay. So right now there are no approved vending spots on WMATA property, but the OP study says there should be or recommends it.
And we had tried that before.
Yeah.
Too, and I know that you all know that we had kind of tried to engage because there's a lot of space over on the WMATA side.
Right.
And it wouldn't, you can set up vendors in a place that doesn't constrict pedestrians. So we're happy to support when the conversations begin.
Is WMATA invited to be part of the quarterly meetings?
We can certainly look into that. I know there were some questions related to the fencing that's on Metro Plaza, and those are within WMATA's purview, although we all know that good public space should not have restrictions like fencing up, so we can work with them through this implementation group.
Yeah, I think that property owner next adjacent put up that fencing actually on public space. So that would be a great thing to address. Okay, let's see. On to the 16th Street corridor streetscape, which includes pilot enhanced bus stops. What would an enhanced bus stop pilot look like?
Well, it would include seating, shading, lighting improvements, interactive digital displays. All of this is contingent on future funding and is something we would also discuss in this implementation meeting.
Got it. How does this intersect with the current status of the bus shelter contract?
We can have DDOT follow up with that, but I think they're the best agency to answer that question.
The section also includes the step of study options to improve pedestrian crossing safety. What crossings in particular? I'm still talking about 16th Street.
Yep. Crossings along 16th Street adjacent to the Powell campus, the intersection of 16th Street and Lamont Street, and intersections surrounding Library Triangle at Lamont Street and Mount Pleasant.
Okay. All right, on to the Powell Playground and Library Triangle action item of consider pilot to further pedestrianized drop-off loop. What loop is that referring to? Is that the one that goes like in front of the library across to 16th?
Correct.
The one that creates that park, basically?
Yes, it's
Okay.
the loop that's referenced as the drop-off circulation drive between the library and the small green space along
Like the Park
16th.
Marconi entrance?
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay, so you consider pedestrianizing that. So you'd be taking out the parking and then the front entrance of that building would then be pedestrian only. Okay.
Correct.
And then so the pilot would be to close it off fully or close it off for special events or?
A pilot would study limited drop-off activity, so maybe, certain hours or certain days of the week. And then we would need it to potentially service loading, and other temporary treatments would be also investigated to see how the area will function better as a pedestrian space.
For the item, consider working with NPS to redesign the space. Is this redesign referring to the triangle on the west side by the library, the same area?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And has that consideration been done by DPR already?
It's been reviewed and approved as a recommendation in this plan.
So specifically the pedestrianization or redesigning the park itself or?
Redesigning the park.
Okay.
Mhm.
Can you detail the most recent conversations between the district and National Park Service on transfers of jurisdiction for small sites like this?
We know that the EOM is actively looking into these opportunities to transfer jurisdiction through cooperative management agreements. They're looking at a variety of sites across the district, and this is one site that's under consideration.
For the Mount Pleasant Street corridor, I see the action item, prioritize trash cleanup and include more public arts, including wall murals. What was this? Why was this an action item for Mount Pleasant Street, but not Columbia Heights?
So this has to do with the recommendations that were represented by what we heard in the communities. It's not that it's not important. It just didn't rank as high on the list. Trash management was identified as a cross-community opportunity. However, cleanup was communicated as more urgent by the Mount Pleasant community. Public art is recommended in Metro Plaza, but it's also, given the existing wall art in Mount Pleasant, it was identified as a near-term option. So I think it had to do with how the recommendations were prioritized within each neighborhood.
Okay. All right, moving to step 2, ideas for action across the study area. Quoting one of your recommendations, explore potential to create business improvement districts or similar entities to take on advanced stewardship. Do your findings indicate that the existing Main Street and Clean Team models aren't adequate for the area's needs?
So the purpose of this study was not to evaluate the efficacy of existing stewardship. Through this process, the Main Street shared a desire for more funding to support its ongoing work.
Okay, so not necessarily, basically.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the fact that there have been many failed attempts to establish a bid for Columbia Heights?
Well, notwithstanding past challenges, current research from other cities that we know is that it shows that a bid or place management entity is helpful to implement a lot of the recommendations listed in the framework. There's a possibility that over time, there can be an opportunity to revisit a bid or Main Street type structure, particularly as the economic realities shift. And additionally, a self-taxing component could really help move forward infrastructure investments desired by the community, similar to other parts of the district.
Okay, so if not a bid, something like the Neighborhood Management Authority that's being proposed before the council right now could be potentially a good fit for this area.
Yes.
Okay. Can we expect new funding in the capital budget to support some of the study's recommendations?
Through the implementation group, I think we can help to prioritize the work of other agencies as implementation agencies to get some of this work in the capital budgets.
Anything else about the implementation of the study you want to talk about?
No, but we do want to thank you for identifying resources for this study. We think it's a great first step forward in this.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
I like the way that it is trying to move us forward in some areas that have been really challenging, the public realm, et cetera. And like we've heard in some of the testimony today, we built this area, what feels like what's some people's lifetimes ago, right?
Yeah.
So, and it really dovetails with the work that DLCP has been trying to do in this area too. And that built environment is really challenging for the enforcement work, for the small business support work. So I'm glad to have you all at one table and excited that those quarterly meetings are going to be kicking off. Any more questions? All right, we will help publicize that the Spanish language version is now available online. And we thank you all for your time today. This concludes today's public hearing. For those who plan on submitting written testimony for the record, please do so by going to the council hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. The record will close on Tuesday, March 10th at 5:30 p.m. The time is 4:57 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, guys.